Welcome back to Spring into Java with me, your host, Glave. So, in the last video, we have made a way so that we could create an HTTP post request. Now, in today's video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to make an endpoint or an address that you could go to in your browser or that you can make this HTTP request to. We are going to create a controller that will be able to handle the input of that, as well as I'll show you how you can make a request that line requires a body. In our case, the DTO body that we are sending. We're also going to create a service level class that is going to act as a way for us to interface with our database and check to see if an account exists, as well as we're going to make a way that we can map our DTO to a registered user and save it to the database in that service class. We're also going to create a repository, which will simply be the database for all intents and purposes. We're going to create a model or an entity of our registered user so that we have something to put into that database. So, if you're ready, fill up that cup of coffee. This is going to be a lot of information. So now to start, we are going to need to copy over our registered form DTO. We're going to copy that, go into our Spring Boot application, dive on into this lib. We are going to create a new package within here for the network, and we are going to call it DTO, so that this is just simply where we're going to store our network's data transfer objects. These will be just the data transfer objects that we're going to be passing amongst the network from our Discord bot to our network. So next, we are going to need to make another package. This package is going to be for our model. So we're going to make a data package, and we're going to make a model package. We are also going to be making a repo package in here to represent where our repositories will be. For all intents and purposes, the repositories will be the what your SQL would call the table. And all of the fields that are in that are going to be the different columns that are inside of that table. So inside of our model, we are going to create a Java class called registered user. And we are going to annotate this first and foremost with our typical getters and setters. As well as we are to annotate this as an entity. This is so that our persistence will be able to map this to a database. So as part of what an entity is, we need to first define an ID. Now, an ID can be something that you either generate yourself, you have Spring generate for you, or you can essentially have a few other options for generating the ID. But we are going to annotate this with a generated value, and we want to tell it that the strategy that we want to use is going to be that of a sequence. Auto will generally let the Spring Boot application choose for you. The UUID would be something if you wish to uniquely choose to set this yourself upon object creation. Table would be something more database stored that tracks your information based on a specific table you have in a database. Sequence is generally safe to go with, as it will keep, as the Spring Data JPA will help keep track of that for you. Now, this has to be an object, so we're going to go ahead and make this a private long. I use long, and it's typically a industry standard for longs to be used because of the size of the number that you can store, being a 64-bit integer or 64-bit number. So next in here, there's a couple of other things that are generally good to keep track of, and these would be the date that the object was created. So we will call this created on, and the other one will be our when this object was last updated. This is generally something that is good to keep track of, just on the off chance you want to know the last time that this object was touched by the program. Now, the other thing that we're going to need to take is we're going to need to take all of this information from our data transfer object, and we're going to want to be able to persist that data. So there, this is our POJO, and this is also going to be mapped into a database where Spring is going to take care of the heavy work. It's going to create us a table that's going to be registered underscore user. It uses the fact that we use camel case to separate the words and then replace any spaces with underscores, and generally it uppercases the text. It will do this to create the table name, registered user, and it will do so to create the different columns within the table. Now, there are other ways to do this, such as you can state the table data through an annotation. You can state the individual columns through different annotations. This video and this course is designed to show you just how easy it is to let Spring Data JPA and Spring do the work for you. This is not designed to show you all of the specific annotations that you should or could or possibly can use. This is designed to show you just how easy it is. That being said, I may create a video or a series in the future that may address that if people happen to want that. But for now, in the sake of this course, going forward, every time we create this, it's going to be to show you just how easy it really is. We may upgrade this course in a later video, but for this is for ease of use. Now, if you're using IntelliJ like I am, you can come up at the top of the screen and click on this Spring Data Repositories button. It will give you the option to create the repository for us. Up here, it already generates a name for us. All we really have to do is state that we want it in the repositories directory and that we are doing this in the applicable language. Now we click OK, and it creates that for us. Now we have our database of registered users. Now, if we want to be able to search for our specific user and do so just by the username, we can do so by creating a find instance. And generally, I use an optional for this because it just makes it easier to determine whether or not the object is empty and allows you to do something else if it isn't. There are a few different reasons for why I do this, but we're going to make this an optional, and it's going to return a registered user from our database with the parameters that it matches the username that we pass in, and it is case sensitive. So if we click on OK, that is going to create the method for us so that we can essentially query our database. Now, the next thing that we need to create, or the next thing that we need to do, is we need a service level class so that we can interface with our repository. So now, to create our service, we're going to go into and make a new package. We're going to call this services. And we are going to create a new Java object. This is going to be the user registration service. And in here, we are going to create a way that we can check to see if a user exists, as well as we are going to create a way to create a new user, as well as we are going to have a third method in here that we're going to create after we've created a data transfer object of the registered user. So first things first, let's make our registered user DTO, which is essentially going to be a copy of our registration form. It's just that this is going to be a registered user DTO. And the reason that I say it's just the same is because for now, this is the only information that we have in our registered user. So it's going to be the only information that we're going to actually have in our registered user DTO, because the user register contains a UID, and that is a unique identifier to the database. So for security reasons and many other best practices, essentially, you never want to be returning the actual database file through a RESTful API, as it does contain some database identifying information which can be used in cyber crimes to attack your database or to find out information about your user. So if we generally best practice make a data transfer object of that data object, we are only ever going to be exposing or using the specific information in which we are looking to let them know. And in our case, we don't want them to know the database information or the ID. We don't really want them to know when this account was created or the last time that it was updated. We do, however, want to be able to pass around the user's information. However, our registered user will not have the password. So that is one other thing that we can take out of there. Because we don't care. Oh, let me just correct this. Make sure that I have that spelled correctly. Now, so again, yes, we do not want to pass in any sort of profile or personal identifying information. So the main purpose of a data transfer object is to be able to make a copy of the original data without necessarily exposing that original data. And personally, I find that a best practice because you're only ever accessing that data for reasons to use or manipulate it. And personally, I have found over my experiences, best practice would be to not have any sort of identifying information in there that can either harm or expose the user's information or harm or expose your database information. So now we have what is generally going to be the information of the user that we're going to pass around. Our user service is going to create a way to check and see if we exist. It's going to create a way to verify the account for login purposes, for example, as well as we're also going to make a method in here to completely create a new account. First and foremost, though, we do need to tell Spring Boot that this is a service. That way, it knows that it has some work to do in here. We are going to come down and create a private final, and this is going to be an instance of our repository. So this was our registered user repository, and we're just going to go ahead and call this our registered user repository. Now, because we called that final, we do need a constructor for it. But to save us creating the constructors over and over again, we're going to go ahead and mark this one as required args constructor, and that'll actually act as a way for and because this is a service class, Spring Boot is going to know that the constructor in here needs to be auto-wired, um, which is also why you see this icon coming up on the left, notifying that this is a resource that has been auto-wired into our dependencies. So next, we're going to come down here and make a public Boolean and this one is going to check to see if the profile or the account exists. So profile exists, and in here we're simply going to take in our registration form DTO, take in the registration, and mark that as a DTO. And next we're going to want to return whether or not our registered user repository can find a user by username that we're going to tell it is from the credentials or from the registration form. And we simply want to see if that is present. So this way, we are now polling the database to see whether or not a user with this username exists and returning true or false whether or not it does. Next, what if we want to create a brand new profile and save it to the database? Well, let's go ahead and first off make a public void create and save new account. And we will take in a registration form DTO as our data transfer object. And in here, we are going to make a new registered user. We're going to call it a new user, and we're going to make sure we're just going to call this a new registered user. Now in here, we are going to need to first make a couple of calls here. Just give me. So we're going to need to make a date time formatter. We'll just call this a DTF. This is going to be equal to the date time formatter dot of pattern, and we're going to say that this is the year. Let's call this month and day. We can go as far as, we're not subtracting that, we're equaling that. We can go as far as dating down some more specifics about this, such as the time, if we wanted to keep track of the hour, minute, seconds. We're going to look to make a local date time object. We're going to call this now, and this will be equal to the local date time of right now. So this will get us the current time for right now, and in just a moment we are going to map that down. So let's go to our new user dot set created on, and this will be our DFT dot format DTF format, and that will take in our current time of Let's go ahead and create that because we are also using that as our set updated on, as this is also going to be the last time this is updated. Next, we're going to need to set up the information from our data transfer. So this will be the new user dot set username of a DTO dot get username, new user dot set email, DTO dot get email, new user dot set first name, DTO dot get first name, and the last name. Set last name is DTO last name. And next, after that, we are going to be looking at now putting the password into an encrypted style. So what we're going to need here is now new user dot set password, and this is going to be equal to a new bcrypt password encoder, and let's see, why do we not have that file? And we are going to have to add a dependency into our POM file. So here we're looking to add the we're looking to add the group ID of org.springframework, and we're looking to get into the security package. From here, we are actually going to be taking the Spring Security Crypto package, and we're just going to go ahead and update our directories. There we go. So now we're going to take another stab at this. We are going to now import the class, and we are going to be now encoding our password. So this is going to encode, and the character sequence that we're looking for is DTO dot get password. This is going to let Spring take care of encrypting that password through the bcrypt encoder, and it's going to save a bcrypt encrypted password to our model. Now next, after that is done, the only thing left to do is save it. So let's go ahead and go into our registered user, and we are going to now call save and pass in the new user mod, and voila, you've now created a brand new object and saved it to the database. Now, what if we want to next make a way to verify that the password we're passing in matches with the password that's saved in the database, just as a way to validate this profile, or to verify the user, if you will. We're going to go ahead and make another Boolean. This is going to be a public Boolean. And this one is simply going to be to check to see if the user is validated, user is verified, or the user's credentials are match. So we'll call this user's credentials match. We're going to take in the registered user DTO, as the submitted credentials. And we are going to take in the actual registered user object as the option to compare against. So here we're just going to pass in the registered user as the object to compare. Now there are much better ways to go about this, but this is just going to be me showing you the most simplest way to simply compare the incoming request with the database request to validate that the essential credentials match. So here we just want to now check and return that the new bcrypt encoder will take care of matching. Now here we just simply pass in, the first thing that we pass in is going to be the raw password or the raw attempt. So this is where we take in our stated credentials and we grab the password. Because again, the registered form DTO is only ever going to have the plain text password. So now we want to compare that with the object to compare, because this password is going to be the encrypted password that is saved in the database, because again, you should never save raw passwords. So this is going to take care of comparing those two hashes, and if the first hash gets the first password gets cached and it happens to equal that of the hashed password that is stored, then this will return true. And we know that the user is who they say they are. So now the next thing that we're going to look to do is create a controller that is going to handle the input requests so that we can take advantage of this service class.